Welcome back to What You Didn't Hear, the podcast where we dig into the surprising backstories behind the traditions we celebrate and the stories we think we know. I'm your host, Zane Gould, and today we're exploring an icon of winter, wonder, and childhood magic, Santa Claus. Where did this jolly man come from? How did he gather traditions from pagan gods, Christian saints, medieval legends, immigrant folklore, and even advertising departments? Today we're taking a deep dive into all the different origins of Santa Claus, a global story thousands of years in the making. Part 1. Winter Gods Before Santa. Long before Santa Claus squeezed down chimneys or checked his list twice, winter in Northern Europe belonged to far older and far more intimidating figures. Chief among them was Odin, the one-eyed allfather of Norse mythology, a god of wisdom, war, death, poetry, and magic. Winter was Odin's season, and he didn't arrive quietly. Odin was believed to ride across the sky on Sleipnir, his legendary eight-legged horse. Sleipnir wasn't just fast, he could travel between worlds, carrying Odin from the realm of the gods to the land of the dead and back again. When winter storms howled through Scandinavia, people didn't hear just wind, they believed they would hear Odin in flight. This celestial ride was known as the Wild Hunt, a terrifying supernatural procession of gods, spirits, and the souls of the dead racing through the winter sky. The Wild Hunt was more active during Yule, the pagan midwinter festival that celebrated the longest night of the year and the slow return of the sun. Seeing the hunt was considered an omen. It might foretell war, plague, or death, or, in some traditions, a coming of change of fate. Children and families sought to stay on Odin's good side. To do so, they placed boots or shoes near the hearth, filling them with hay, straw, or carrots for Sleipnir. In return, Odin was said to leave small gifts or blessings behind. This exchange, offerings for flying horse in hopes of rewards, bears a striking resemblance to the modern traditions involving stockings, reindeer, and Christmas Eve. Odin himself even shared visual traits with Santa Claus. He was often depicted as an elderly man with a long white beard, wearing a hooded cloak and traveling in disguise among mortals. He rewarded hospitality and punished greed, wandering the world to observe humanity, much like the supernatural judge keeping an eye on behavior. When Christianity spread across Europe, Odin and the Wild Hunt were officially condemned as pagan superstition. But folklore has a way of surviving. Over centuries, Odin's role softened. The terrifying god of death and storms slowly merged with other winter figures, saints, and folk traditions. By the time Santa Claus emerged as a recognizable character, Odin's ghost was still there, riding the winter sky, delivering gifts, and watching from the shadows of the longest nights of the year. Other pre-Christian traditions across Europe. Winter festivals often featured gift-giving spirits, protective household beings, and ancestors celebrated during the darkest part of the year. Part 2. Saint Nicholas, the Christian Root. The figure of Saint Nicholas was not born in the North Pole or imagined as a folklore character. He was a real person who lived in the 4th century in the Roman Empire. Nicholas served as the Bishop of Myra, a port city located at what is now modern-day Turkey. Myra sat at the crossroads of Mediterranean trade routes, and Nicholas was known throughout the region for his deep piety and extraordinary generosity. Nicholas was born into a wealthy Christian family, but rather than living comfortably, he chose to use his inheritance to help those in need. What made him remarkable was not just that he gave, it was how he gave. Nicholas believed charity should be anonymous, offered without praise or recognition. His most famous legend tells the story of a desperately poor man who had 3 daughters. Without dowries, the girls faced being sold into servitude or worse, a tragic but very real possibility in the ancient world. According to tradition, Nicholas learned of the family's situation and decided to help in secret. Under the cover of darkness, he threw bags of gold through the family's window, or in some versions, down the chimney, where the coins landed in stockings left out to dry by the fire. When the family awoke, they found themselves saved by an unknown benefactor. Stories like this spread rapidly. Nicholas became known as the protector of children, a defender of the poor, and a champion of justice. Other legends credit him with saving sailors from storms, resurrecting murdered children, and confronting corrupt officials. By the time of his death, Nicholas had already become one of the most beloved saints in Christianity. After his passing, his feast day, December 6, became a time for gift-giving, especially to children. Church towns and families across Europe honored him not as a magical figure, but as a model of selfless generosity. As Christianity spread across Europe, devotion to Saint Nicholas took on regional flavors. In the Netherlands, he became known as Sinterklaas, a figure who closely resembled a church bishop rather than a folkloric elf king. Sinterklaas was depicted as a tall, dignified man wearing flowing red bishop's robes, a pointed mitre, and carrying a ceremonial staff. Each year, he was said to arrive from afar riding a white horse, traveling across rooftops to deliver gifts. Dutch children left out shoes filled with carrots or hay for the horse, an echo of the older European winter traditions, and in return received treats or small presents. The celebration of Sinterklaas took place on the night of December 5th, known as Sinterklaasavond, or on December 6th, his feast day. Children sang songs, recited prayers, and eagerly awaited his arrival, believing he kept track of their behavior throughout the year. When Dutch settlers brought their traditions to the New World, particularly to New Amsterdam, later known as New York City, Sinterklaas crossed the Atlantic with them. Over time, the name Sinterklaas evolved into Santa Claus, and the bishop slowly transformed. His religious authority softened, his robes shortened, and his horse would eventually be replaced by reindeer. But the core idea remained: a figure who rewards kindness, generosity, and good behavior. In this way, Saint Nicholas, the humble bishop who gave gifts in secret, became the moral and historical backbone of the modern Santa Claus legend. Part 3. The European Folk Figures. Father Christmas from England. Father Christmas emerged in England during the late Middle Ages, long before Santa Claus became associated with children's toys. He was not a gift bringer in the modern sense, but a personification of the Christmas season itself, embodying warmth, abundance, and communal joy during the coldest time of the year. Traditionally depicted as a large bearded man dressed in green or fur-lined robes, Father Christmas represented feasting, music, drinking, and hospitality. He presided over long banquets, public celebrations, and rowdy merriment rather than quiet nights by the fireplace. His role was to remind people to set aside hardship, social divisions, and labor during Christmas, and instead embrace generosity and good cheer. During England's Puritan period in the 17th century, Christmas celebrations were suppressed as sinful excess. Father Christmas became a symbol of resistance, appearing in pamphlets and plays as a defender of traditional joy against religious austerity. Over time, as Victorian Christmas traditions took shape, Father Christmas gradually merged with the American-influenced Santa Claus, trading green robes for red and gaining a new role as the children's gift bringer. La Befana of Italy. In Italian folklore, La Befana is a kindly, if slightly unsettling, old woman who brings gifts to children on the night of January 5th, the eve of Epiphany. Unlike Santa, she doesn't arrive from the North Pole. She flies on a broomstick, enters homes through chimneys, and leaves behind sweets or small toys for good children, and coal for those who misbehaved. Her origins blend Christian legend and ancient pagan belief. According to tradition, the three wise men asked an elderly woman for directions on their journey to visit the newborn Jesus. She declined to join them, but later regretted her decision. Setting out to find the Christ child, she carried gifts, and along the way gave them to every child she met, hoping one of them was Jesus. La Befana also has deep roots in pre-Christian Roman festivals, particularly agricultural rites, marking the end of the old year and a promise of renewal. Her broom symbolizes sweeping away the past year's troubles and making room for new beginnings. Though she appears witch-like, she is widely regarded as benevolent, maternal, and protective, representing wisdom earned through age. Ded Moroz of Russia. In Russian folklore, Ded Moroz, or Grandfather Frost, began as a powerful and sometimes fearsome personification of winter itself. Early versions of Ded Moroz could freeze travelers or still children, a stark reminder of winter's danger in Slavic lands. Over time, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries, Ded Moroz softened into a wise winter wizard who rewarded good behavior rather than punishing disobedience. He wears long robes in shades of blue, white, or red, carries a magical staff, and travels through snowy forests instead of flying through the sky. Uniquely, Ded Moroz is accompanied by his granddaughter, and I don't know how to pronounce that name, but she is referred to as the Snow Maiden. A gentle, youthful figure, dressed in white and blue. Together they deliver gifts during New Year's celebrations, not Christmas. This shift was cemented during the Soviet era, when religious holidays were discouraged but winter festivities were preserved in secular form. Not all winter gift-bringers were kind. In the Alpine regions of Austria, Germany, and the surrounding areas, Krampus served as a terrifying counterpart to Saint Nicholas. Half goat, half demon, with horns, chains, and a long tongue, Krampus punished naughty children, beating them with sticks or dragging them away in baskets. Krampus likely evolved from the pre-Christian Alpine spirits, associated with winter chaos and the dangers of darkness. As Christianity spread, these figures were reimagined as demons, then attached to Saint Nicholas's celebrations as enforcers of moral behavior. Other regions featured similar figures, like Perchta, who punished laziness, Necht Ruprecht, a grim servant of Saint Nicholas, and Bel Snickle, a fur-clad disciplinarian brought to America by German immigrants. These darker companions reflected a worldview in which winter was not cozy. It was dangerous, unforgiving, and demanded discipline. Together they formed a moral balance, reward for the good, punishment for the bad. Across Europe, winter gift-bringers reflected local fears, hopes, and values. Some celebrated joy and abundance. Others enforced order through fear. Modern Santa Claus is a softened descendant of all of them. A figure stripped of punishment, danger, and religious authority, leaving behind warmth, generosity, and cheer. Part 4. The American Evolution. When Dutch settlers founded New Amsterdam in the 17th century, later renamed New York City, they brought their beloved winter traditions with them, including Sinterklaas, the gift-giving saint celebrated on December 6. Though the colony eventually fell under English control, Dutch customs lingered in family traditions, folk stories, and local celebrations. Over time, Sinterklaas became anglicized in pronunciation. English-speaking neighbors struggled with the Dutch name, and it gradually transformed into Santa Claus. The figure himself also began to change. His overt religious identity as a Catholic bishop faded in Protestant America, while his role as a cheerful bringer of gifts remained. This shift made Santa more culturally flexible, less saint, more folklore. By the late 18th century, Santa Claus existed in American culture as a loosely defined holiday figure, familiar but not yet standardized. In 1809, American writer Washington Irving published A History of New York from the Beginning of the World to the End of the Dutch Dynasty, a satirical work written under the pseudonym Diedrich Knickerbocker. Though meant as humor, Irving's stories had a lasting cultural impact. Irving reimagined the Dutch Saint Nicholas as a jolly, pipe-smoking figure who flew through the air in a wagon and delivered gifts to children. He stripped away most of the saint's religious authority and recast him as a playful, distinctly American folk character. Importantly, Irving placed Santa in the realm of nostalgia, a symbol of an imagined, cozy colonial past. This was one of the first times Santa appeared not as a church figure or moral enforcer, but as a whimsical storyteller's creation. Everything changed in 1823 with the publication of a poem, A Visit from Saint Nicholas, better known today as Twas the Night Before Christmas. Attributed to Clement Clark Moore, the poem didn't just describe Santa, it defined him. From Moore's verses came some of Santa's most enduring traits: a sleigh pulled by 8 reindeer, entry through chimneys, a small, round, cheerful figure who laughed easily, a secret nighttime visit on Christmas Eve, not December 6th. The poem shifted Santa's focus squarely toward children and family life, cementing Christmas as a domestic, sentimental holiday. It also replaced judgment and fear with warmth and delight. Santa no longer punished, he simply brought joy. If Moore gave Santa his personality, Thomas Nast gave him his face and world. Beginning in the 1860s, Thomas Nast published a series of illustrations in Harper's Weekly that visually standardized Santa Claus for millions of Americans. Nast introduced or popularized many features we now take for granted: Santa living at the North Pole, a workshop staffed by elves, a naughty and nice list, Santa's round belly, twinkling eyes, and fur-trimmed red suit. Nast also connected Santa to American values, portraying him as a supporter of Union soldiers during the Civil War. By the end of the 19th century, Santa Claus was no longer a collection of regional myths. He was a fully formed national icon. Through immigration, satire, poetry, and illustration, Santa Claus evolved from a European saint into a uniquely American creation. Each contributor didn't just add details, they removed danger, religion, and fear, replacing them with comfort, nostalgia, and joy. By the time the 20th century arrived, Santa Claus was ready for his final transformation into a global symbol of Christmas itself. Part 5. The Modern Santa. By the early 20th century, Santa Claus was already recognizable, but he wasn't yet fixed. Depending on the artist or region, Santa might appear tall or short, stern or playful, dressed in red, brown, green, or even blue. What finally locked Santa into the image we recognize today wasn't folklore or religion. It was advertising. Beginning in the 1930s, the Coca-Cola company launched a series of Christmas advertising campaigns featuring Santa Claus. These ads, illustrated most famously by Haddon Sundblom, did not invent Santa's red suit. That element already existed, but they humanized and standardized him in a way no single tradition ever had before. Sundblom's Santa was warm and grandfatherly, round-faced with rosy cheeks, cheerful rather than mystical, approachable, friendly, and unmistakably kind. This Santa laughed easily, drank Coke, chatted with children, and felt real, like someone you might actually meet. Importantly, he wasn't a judge or a supernatural enforcer. He was a comforting presence during the Great Depression, a time when Americans desperately needed reassurance and familiarity. These images were printed everywhere: magazines, storefronts, billboards. Over decades, Coca-Cola's Santa became the Santa. Even people who never drink Coke absorbed the image. By mid-century, Santa Claus was no longer just a character. He was a global icon, recognizable across cultures and continents. Ironically, the most commercial version of Santa ended up preserving something ancient: the idea of generosity without expectation, joy without judgment, and warmth in the darkest part of the year. Part 6. Around the World with Santa. Despite the dominance of the modern Santa Claus, winter gift bringers around the world still reflect local history, climate, and belief. In Norway, children await Julenisse, a small bearded house spirit rooted in ancient farm folklore. Julenisse watches over the home year-round and rewards families who treat him kindly. He's less flashy than Santa, more particular, more watchful, but deeply trusted. In Finland, Santa is known as Joulupukki, which literally translates to Yule goat. This name comes from the pre-Christian pagan traditions where a goat-like figure represented winter and the harvest. Over time, Joulupukki transformed into a Santa-like figure, and today Finland proudly claims him as the real Santa living in Lapland. In Germany and Central Europe, many children don't receive gifts from Santa at all, but from Christkind, a childlike angelic figure representing the Christ child, introduced during the Protestant Reformation. The Christkind was meant to replace Saint Nicholas, shifting focus back to Christian theology rather than saints. In Spain and much of Latin America, the most important gift givers aren't Santa or Saint Nicholas, but the three kings, the Magi who visited the infant Jesus. Gifts arrive on January 6, Epiphany, reminding families that Christmas is not a single day, but a season. Each of these traditions reflects the same core idea: winter is hard, darkness is long, and generosity matters. Santa Claus isn't one story. He is many stories layered on top of each other, shaped by centuries of belief, fear, hope, and imagination. He is a Norse god riding the winter sky, a Christian saint giving gifts in secret, a collection of European folk figures, some kind and some terrifying, and uniquely an American creation, refined by poetry, illustration, and advertising. Santa survived because he adapted. Each generation reshaped him to reflect what it needed most: protection, morality, joy, comfort, or wonder. In the end, Santa Claus isn't about reindeer, chimneys, or red suits. He's about the promise that even the coldest, darkest part of the year, kindness still arrives. Thank you for joining this deep dive into the origins of Santa Claus. And wherever you are in the world, Merry Christmas.
Into the deep.